Hello, hello. It's exactly 6:30, so we're just gonna give a little bit of time for people to hop in. Promptness is great, but it is 6:30. It's a Tuesday. It's nice outside. So for everyone hopping in, my name is Brittany. We'll do a little bit more intros in a minute or so. I'm one of the co-founders of the Diversity and Inclusion Agency Incorporated, and I'm Badur. I'm the creative director of Incorporated, and we are live from ATMOS at 125th or on 125th, and there's some heat behind us. So shameless plug to come into the store if you want to pick up something or just like check out a store in real life again. And so we'll get started. Feel free for anyone who's hopping in now, or if you're hopping in later, just go with the flow. We are going to be talking through a lot of things really just related to creative careers in general. And that's like the broad spectrum of creative careers, anything from like graphic design, writing, marketing, like traditional footwear design, product development, like anything within the creative space, like how creatives can talk about their work effectively and write it down, like in a resume, on a portfolio, on LinkedIn, and just like specific tips and tricks that we can all use to do that a little bit more effectively and tell the story that we really want to tell about our experiences. And then we'll pivot more into a conversation about, like, based on our experiences, what we've learned about negotiation, what you can ask for, how you should ask for things, how you prepare to like step into a negotiation, and just like personal strategies for measuring success as a creative. So once again, I'm Brittany. I'm one of the co-founders of Incorporated. Incorporated is a diversity and inclusion agency that is focused on really bridging the gap between communities and industry. So offering strategies, spaces, opportunities, events that help bring those two sides together and really spread awareness about career opportunities, give people experience, give people opportunities to grow in their career, to meet new people, and ultimately like give back.
And I'm Badur, the creative director of Incorporated.
So she makes everything look really beautiful and helps us effectively tell our story on all of our digital platforms and any communications that you see us put out. Yeah. So we are going to be joined by two amazing creatives. So we have Liz Connolly, who will introduce herself, and then Emily Kim.
Hey, so I'm Liz Connolly. I am a consultant on the talent and brand side, and one of the founders of a program at Adidas called SEED, the School for Experiential Education and Design, and I continue to work with that program primarily.
Hi, everyone. My name is Emily. I am a visual designer and a visual communicator based out of Philadelphia. I currently work for a footwear manufacturer based in Philadelphia as well. It's called Garrison, and we make footwear straight from scratch.
Awesome. Thank you both. And we as Incorporated have worked with, not Emily directly, but with Garrison and with Liz in the past. It's been amazing. And so we're really excited to be joined with both of them today for this conversation. So we're going to be segmenting this session into like two main parts. The first is we're going to get really tactical. We're going to take a look at resumes, and Liz is going to lead us through like some edits, some tools that we can all like take notes on, take screenshots, and learn about what we can all be doing a little bit better when it comes to telling our story. Specifically using a resume, but this can be used, or these tools can be used across the board. So if we want to dig right into or shift over into the presentation. So here we have a communications resume. Format level, like pretty standard. But what we'll get into is some of the review that Liz did about this resume. And then we have a second graphic design resume, slightly different format, but we'll do the same thing where we'll go through step by step and just take a look at different areas of improvement. and then conclude with like general resume tips that we can all just employ for ourselves. So we're gonna head to the next slide. Cool. So Liz, tell us like what we're looking at here.
Yeah, totally. So I think for me, my perspective is always coming from like a recruiting perspective. I still do a ton of recruitment. I did recruitment full-time on the corporate side for a while. The biggest thing to keep in mind when writing a resume for me is like thinking about my audience, right? Like where is their brain at? What are they doing in a recruitment role? And especially for a position probably at the level that Amber has here, like I'm going to get 300 to 500 resumes at a major company like Adidas, where I was recruiting before, in 3 days, probably. So I'm reading through all of them. For me, I want relevance. Like most of our systems don't help awesome, pretty formats. Like it'll turn it black and white. It'll make it look like all sorts of like busted. So for me, I'm like, I need the vital information. How do I get a hold of you at the top? And then what is your experience? So for this, as great as it is to see that education and references are available, it's not that important. And so moving it below so that I can focus on the information that matters quickly is going to help me make a decision even better.
And Liz, in terms of hierarchy, when it comes to the resume, do you suggest that the most recent experiences are at the top and then the older ones are at towards the bottom, or?
I think typically like that would make sense. I think there's individual scenarios where maybe you would shift that, where if you're trying to make a career move and your most relevant or your most recent isn't the most relevant to the job you're actually applying to, that might be reason to reconfigure. If it's like, this is the next job and my recent experience is also relevant, definitely most recent first, because I think like, again, your resume is like one way in which you're telling the story of you and like all the things that you can do and all the places you've been that are going to make you great for this. So being able to see that and like, oh, this is where you just were, and like, oh, cool, and before that you were doing this. So I'm starting to like bridge like who you are and how you got on each level. So that timeline is typically the like really valuable just for understanding the person.
And while we're like focused on just like the high level information, what are just some of your thoughts around having a summary or having like an objective statement?
I mean, I do think that like any opportunity to tell a little bit more about you in this like soul sucking application process, like it's great, right? So am I gonna like start out in your about me section and be like super pumped if it's like a big paragraph? Like as a recruiter, I'm probably gonna like be like, quick glance at the experience, now do I want to come back to it, right? And then see like, is it worth that extra? I know it sounds like 5 seconds is scary on the candidate side, but like it's like, am I gonna take 5 more seconds when I have 500 more to go through? But if your experience is in line, like heck yeah, the about me, like it makes me feel human, it makes me feel connected. And like I think especially in industries like ours and sneakers, like sports, music, fashion, like the culture of a place like New York City, like who are you, where are you from? And like, I think most importantly, what makes you different from somebody who has very similar experience? So like, yes, if you can add it, add it.
Awesome. Cool. So let's go to the next slide. I think we're getting more into like the experience specifics here.
Yeah, for this one, I think like just understanding like the marketplace, right? In like what are different titles at different companies called? What so like for this one, corporate communications associate manager. So some companies are going to be like, you have an associate manager, an assistant manager, a senior manager. This might be actually referring to, I manage the associates through communications. And so like making sure that you're thinking about, again, like your audience, like what exactly does this happen? Because that's the first thing I'm trying to read. I would probably keep reading. Like it wouldn't stop me seeing this, but when I get to the next bullet, it's like, manage content for global communications channels to drive associate engagement. And so now I'm like, oh, like who are the associates? And is that what we're managing is our communication to them? So your level is actually manager. And I'm taking you on my brain path, but for me, I'm like, what level are you? Like, are you even at the level we would consider for this kind of role? You know, so are you an associate manager or are you a manager and this is your responsibility? I'm trying to gauge, like, are you ready for this next step based on experience? So I can understand your responsibility better by the title.
Awesome. That's very interesting. Like, I was reading the comment and I understood, like, initially I thought I understood, and then I was like, wait, okay, I get why you're saying this, because language is very important and very different companies, different industries.
Yeah, definitely. I think that's the funny part too on things like this is like, if I read, oh, associate manager, this role is a senior manager, I would maybe stop reading. Like, again, 500 in the bucket, I would maybe be like, oh, too junior. Like, cool experience, but too junior for this one. But really, it doesn't seem like that's what they're saying, is that it's the level.
Got it.
Yeah, we can go to the next slide, I think. Unless there's ads, yeah. So this one, I think, like, ultimately I can read the content below this and get a good sense of like what this person's working on. But I think to take your resume more from like a good to great situation, like how can you provide a little bit more like specificities of the work you're doing to show me why you're great at it, like what you bring to the table that makes it strong. So like, I think also, okay, working at Foot Locker Inc., like pretty large company, like what is the volume of the work you're doing? How many associates are you managing? Like what is the KPI of like the engagement that you're trying to reach, and did you reach it? Like, so those numbers and like even like telling like volume or like how fast, like what kind of deadlines are you working on? Like how many projects in a season are you managing? Those things are going to make me be like, oh, okay. Like you already answered my questions. Like I can see like the volume at which you're working. I can see the different types, like who are these associates, like the different types of people you're working with. I can see maybe different ways you specifically like drove that work instead of just listing what you do. I think the way I look at it is like in Flip, right? When we read a job description, we're like, cool, I have no idea what I'm actually going to do in this job. Like they just gave us like a blanket, like manage social. And you're like, I mean, like, I think I can do that, but like, what does that even mean? Manage social? Like how many social channels on what platforms, like in what markets, like who are we trying to attract? What are the measurable like KPIs that you're going to actually like gauge my performance against? You know, it's the same thing with a resume. I would apply to the job that already told me those things. I would hire the person who already told me those things. But if you leave me being like, okay, these were your responsibilities, but I don't know to what impact you did it, you kind of go in my pile of like, maybe. And what I think you want to do in a resume is answer all the questions up front so that like a no is better than a maybe, because a maybe is what most of us, I think, get put into. And then we never hear back ever because they're still like, well, you weren't no, you're just maybe. And in most cases in the job search, like a no is better than nothing, so that I can be like, get out of my head, I'm moving on, right? So if you put those facts and it's like, oh, I needed to engage, like have like a 5% engagement level on social for every post or something like that, I would be like, okay, we need like 20%. Like, so maybe you don't have the experience of like driving content that's really going to get there. So I might just say no, but at least now you know that and you can move on, right? And then the company that's looking for something more in the lines of what you've actually done will say yes. And then if I have done something and I get moved to the yes, I'm going to get moved to the yes quicker, which means I might beat the other 400 people behind me and get into process quicker too. Like answer all the questions. That's the key.
So this is kind of a little off topic, but you just touched on it. Is it actually better to be like one of the first applicants or one of the last applicants? And like,
it depends how the company's system is organized. So like as a recruiter, I can make it alphabetical. I can do it by recent. Like I might never touch a thing and like just look. So I don't know that there's a certain strategy. What I would say is like, I'm like a stay ready so you don't ever have to get ready person, right? Like I have my stuff on lock. If I'm like, I want to know where I'm trying to go and have my materials prepared so that it's a minor tweak in 5 to 10 minutes to make sure it's like relevant to that JD and a quick apply, because what you don't want to happen is the job posting to come down, or if it's been up for a really long time, they might be in process.
Yeah.
And if you find a match, are you going to keep looking? Like probably not. So I think like as soon as you're ready, apply. I think earlier would technically be better, but I wouldn't say like being the first and like submitting your application with like, again, like not answering all the questions yet would not be as good as like submitting it when you're ready.
Got it. And I'll just say some like quick acronym definitions: JD, job description, and KPI, key performance indicator. So like anytime you're doing something, how are you measuring your performance?
Thank you. Sorry about that.
All good. Let's head to the next.
Yep. The next one.
The next one.
There we go. I think this is like another point. Like, okay, this is a pretty cool element to have on your resume, right? Like, it looks like you were the first of something, maybe in charge of like total direction of a place that I think, especially in the hiring world right now, is we're looking for people who have done things different. We're looking for diversity, right? We want to bring in maybe like someone who knows women's, and we see this like, okay, this person just strategized overall direction of the women's site. Like, I have so many questions now. Like what, like, so anything that I'm going to go to that website immediately. Like if I get excited about this, is anything I'm looking at you? Like, did you build it out? Were you part of like the visual design of it? Was it just the content? So like, I want to know like every piece of it. Were you working on a team during this, or was it solely you? And then like what, again, back to the measurables, like what was the goal going in? Where was the women's site? Like, was it at 0 when you got it? And where did you bring it to? Like, we want to see what happened during that time. What was the progress of this work at the time you're there? I think right now I'm just left like, okay, this is cool. I'm interested, but what exactly did you do? How did it happen? And again, like maybe somebody else has a resume, very similar experience, but they answer those questions. I will call them first. That's a fact.
Got it.
Because then I get to like, who are you? Not what have you done? Here I'm still like, but what have you done? And the resume is the thing that's supposed to hopefully tell me that, to make like my recruiting job easier.
And just to segue really quickly into just the audience question, what do you do if you're looking to gain experience and you keep getting responses that you don't have enough experience?
It's like the worst feeling in the world, like literally the worst. Okay, I'll use a personal tale, I guess. I think like first I'll say, if you can work on any kind of project in your current role that is in the direction of where you want to go, even if it's volunteer additional, that's great, so that you have that experience. For me personally, before I got hired at Adidas, I was running a waffle restaurant. And then I just I got hired at big global corporate Adidas in recruiting with like no actual experience and no connections whatsoever. And what I did is like, I really valued my experience working at the restaurant. To this day, I'm like, that's where I learned everything I need to know to be great at anything. And I rewrote everything that I did. And like, sure, I could have talked about making waffles. Sure, I could have talked about like just managing the day-to-day like customer satisfaction at a restaurant. But instead I talked about the way I managed all hiring and firing, HR, implemented a new health insurance like policy, like took care of payroll, held events, managed like built out a catering business, like was able to drive money and profit margins to this much at this volume, created a training program, digitized our restaurant system so that we could actually manage it from a computer. like things like that were more relevant to the work that I would actually end up doing. Even though if like you were my friend and you heard about my day, you'd be like, oh my gosh, you learned how to plumb toilets today. And like I did, and that was great experience too, but like I'm not going to focus on that here. That's for like my fun stories with my friends. And then like here, I'm going to only focus on the parts that are relevant to the next job I'm trying to get. Cause like, I do think that where you don't have like the direct experience, you've done something that is like the same skills you need in that job. You just have to figure out, how do I translate it so that I'm telling the truth, I'm telling a real story, and I'm showcasing the value. And then what's the hardest part, I think, for us is like, you know, is it a reach? Like, can I reach it and touch it, this thing I'm going for? Or is it like, I actually need to call a cab and go across town to actually get to the thing that I'm saying is like, yes, this job is like a stretch from where I'm at. If you can touch it, then like you're good. So I think, if that makes sense, it's a weird analogy I'm going off on, but like basically, like, is the next job you're going for, like, do you have those moments that you can stack up that might be enough? Or is this like a little too far? Yeah. Does that make sense?
Definitely.
Cool. Think we can go next slide?
Yeah.
Sweet. Badura. So first of all, I'll start on this resume. I like it as like I'm all about the creative stuff, but like this is so easy for my brain and my eyes to follow. And like the formatting, the bold, I can get like right at the top. I have where you're located, how to reach you, portfolio of work. Like I'm a happy person when this resume pops up because it's just like that makes my life easier. The pretty ones, like in real life, I'm like, I want the pretty everything. In reviewing resumes on repeat, like make it easy so that my eyes don't have to strain, because like I'm dying.
That's an interesting point, because I've seen and heard before, like if I'm reviewing, and hypothetical me, I'm reviewing like a creative resume. I'm like, I want it to be cool, to show that you're creative.
Yeah.
You know, I've heard that before, and I feel like a lot of people look for that thing. So how do you balance the basic need of understanding that people who are looking through tons of resumes are really like skimming high level and very quickly, versus like showcasing your creativity and letting your resume actually kind of be some sort of like walking portfolio in a way?
I think there's like little ways that you can embellish and give me a sense of like your style or your like own creative like flair, and not lose this same aspect of like, here's the facts. I do also think that like hiring manager might be more into like, whoa, this looks cool, like I love it, but it usually has to get through a recruiter to get to them. So for me, like, and most of the recruiters I've worked with, like it's like, it can be pretty still, but make sure like the facts, like I can follow it, that like the story is really clear. And like that would be the biggest thing for me. And I also think like your portfolio, especially if you're in a design role, like that's the bread and butter. That's probably what I'm really passing on to the next person. So like that better be pretty. Like your portfolio better be like where we see the creator that you are. Right? Your resume, it's like a formality. I mean, most people are moving to only LinkedIn anyway, because when you apply to a global role, because of GDPR, which I don't remember what it stands for, but it's basically like privacy protection. Like we can't hold emails that are like from Europe in our email inboxes. Like we literally have to delete it. So we're always like, if we're sharing an email, we can't email it to somebody. We're going and finding their LinkedIn and sharing links because it's public information. So we don't get in that tricky situation. So I would also say like, and LinkedIn is like the place where you can be the least creative ever, pretty much. So like, I think like that step is like, what are your facts? Do you qualify? Now I want all your feelings. Like that's the way I look at it.
Got it. Cool. So let's dig into this one.
Yeah, so this one, I'm just curious of like what else did you do? Especially it's an internship, right? So what, like, how does your brain work? Like, what did you research? What did you assess that was wrong? What problems were you trying to solve by adding these new features? So you say like better serve the user experience and grow the company's, as well as the company's growing capabilities. So like, what did you do to make those two things happen is what I'd be really like excited and interested to see. Again, like if you can give me the evidence up front, you just move to the front of the pile. This would still make me interested, but I have questions.
Well, I have a question. So Liz, actually, so this is my resume. So the website features that let's say actually make it more general. If you are working on something that is still in the process and you can't talk about it on a resume, how do you do that?
I mean, I think that, well, one, I typically use like in sneakers, like with our students, I'm like, we can't talk about that sneaker that you designed, but like you need to say you did this because it's going to be, we usually have like 18 months until something actually comes out from when we do it, right? And so what I try to say is like a launch date. So, or like add a link if you can. Like this is like even saying here, like the project I had as an intern was to research, assess, find the problems in our site that are preventing us from optimizing user experience and growing the company's capabilities. Or yeah, and so I would say like what can you say? Like, are there ways that you look at that, or like I fully owned the research and like figuring out the key problems phase, as well as actually executing on the problem solving process for those. Our new features will launch in blank date, like tentatively. So that way I'm like, cool, I'm not going to go to that website and judge you for it, because I might, like, if I didn't know that, like I'd be like, well, let's go check that website, and you know what I mean, and be like, let's see if it's user friendly. So saying that the launch date is going to be at X point in time will give me the like understanding of like, okay, so I can't see what she did yet, but I can see what you were actually tasked with to do.
Cool.
Thanks.
I feel like that's one of the biggest questions, especially from students, like almost all the time, because you get stuck in that place of like, I've done things, they just won't come out yet, and I can't tell you about them publicly.
Mhm.
You know?
Yeah, that's another thing for creative portfolios as well, is something I've run into where I've worked on something, but it's still in the process of receiving feedback or just not launching yet. So you have a lot of work that you're excited about showing and talking about, but you have to be very careful of it, obviously. So
yeah, totally. I think we can go. Yep.
Yep.
Yeah. So this one, I think like just words like impactful and strong. They're obviously good words, right? They make me excited. But what I immediately want to know is like, what was the impact? What made them strong? Like who, like, okay, the audience is partners and clients. Like how, like, what did they do? Like, did they give you more money? You know, did they feel something? Did they like gain like brand affinity? Like, what was it that actually happened to these partners and clients? Like, I think like, because I know a little bit about Incorporated, right? Like you started using graphics, like what, maybe like what was some of like the social engagement or participation in different events? Like, how did that increase? Or can you even like, I don't know, link a couple examples here, even though you probably have them in your portfolio, or reference. Again, I pull out like KPIs, like what were the indicators that would deem your work successful or not successful? And can you like bullet those so that I'm like, oh, you made them feel like they belong, like they were curious and like they wanted to like engage and participate, right? Or, and then like maybe it's like participation grew to this over this year. Like, was that your design? I don't know, but like maybe. And so that could be a contributing factor that you can showcase a little bit better, just to like showing a little bit more evidence of like how you're doing those things.
Cool.
Next here. Yeah, and this is a place again that like if you're gonna include soft skills, I think some people will tell you it's like what like I think some people will tell you they don't matter as much. I think when they say they don't matter, it's because when you read 500 resumes that all say like soft skills, work great with people, like, you know, quick learner, like that's when it feels like it doesn't matter. But I think like a little bit more context here is exciting. Like even just how it impacts you, creative problem solving. Like there is no problem that I don't grin from ear to ear about as I try to figure it out. Like I'm like, oh, like that's a fun energy to be around. Like, okay, so like you don't just like creative problem solve, like you're excited to, like you look for the problems everywhere to try and solve them. And you do it in a fun way. Like adaptability, like maybe even an example of like how you've had to adapt. Like what does that mean? And then also like teamwork and organization, like how, you know, I'll remember one of my best friends, she interviewed for a role. I don't even think she ended up getting it. And I actually do this on my phone now, which is funny, but, they were like, okay, what's like one of your strengths? And she was like, I'm so organized. And they were like, how? And she was like, literally like this. And she showed her phone and it's like color coordinated as mine is. And like, they were just like, oh, you're like that kind of person. Right. And it's like, that's totally different than like, I'm organized. It's like, oh, you color code the apps on your phone. Okay. Like that's something. So I want to see that, or like, and same thing with teamwork. Like for me, I can work on my own, but the energy of a team is when I am at my absolute best. Like that's when I step into leadership roles. That's when I am like pumping up the people in the room with me. So like teamwork for me is going to look different than teamwork for somebody else. So anywhere you can show soft skills wise, what is different about these words for you, I think it's super helpful. And I know that it's the bottom of the page and you run out of room and then you want to write like a whole thing. But like, this is where I'd say like, especially as a graphic designer, like, can you get some symbols in here that show me like those things to you, what they mean? Like, can you visualize those things in a way like that will also make me be like, damn, that was a good graphic. Like, I get it. Like, you're that kind of teammate. Okay. Oh, you solve problems in that kind of way. Like, I get it. That would be really helpful here in a way to definitely stand out.
So you can definitely, for a section like this, have more than one word. It's like more of a description as opposed to like a one-word definition of the soft skill that you're trying to show.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, you have to use your judgment and like make sure it's true to you. Like that's my biggest thing with resumes is like, is it reflective of who you are and what you can do? Like any line like this, like in the bit, I know you, like, I don't imagine that you would put this line on anything with your name on it and say, this is me and leave it at just that. Right. Mm-hmm. Like you're so much more than that. You're so much more than these like 4 words. So how can you make sure that it's represented in that way? Some recruiters, some hiring managers are gonna be like, I don't care about the bottom skills part. Like I'll talk to you on the phone. Don't worry about it. And I think that like the value point isn't like the highest. Again, I got to get through all the other vital information to even care about this section, really. But if you're gonna put soft skills, like it's a chance to show more personality. So, and I think somebody will tell you like, maybe they'll tell you a rule like no definitions or one word only. Like for me, I mean, everything's digital now. So like, even if your resume is more than 1 page, I don't really care if it's like worth scrolling for, you know, if it's worth scrolling for, I'm in for the scroll. Like once it's not, then no. So same thing here, like, all right, if you included a little more information, but it was like fun when I got to it and it showed me something about you, like I'm in. If you were super wordy and I'm like, okay, dude, like I'll call you later and like find out that stuff, like, you know, so it's like, it's just navigating that balance of like, is this reflective of me? And like, who is my audience? Like, you know, so that would be my point there. I know the gray information is what we try to get away from in this. Like, give me the black and white. Like, what is it? But right. it truly is like up to the individual.
Yeah. That's also kind of fun, you know, like
Yeah.
you got to play around and really tell your own story. So.
It's hard too. You're like, I don't want to talk about myself.
Well, we all love talking about, like, we can tell our friends' stories. It's like the second you're like, okay, Liz, now show me your resume. I'm like, what do you mean? So
Exactly.
that's what we should do next time. You'll have to put me on the spot. It's hard.
We should. I know that we have to let you go, Liz, soon.
Oh, yeah.
So we can like run through these resume tips, but before you go, I do want to just like let everyone know that Liz, being the great, awesome person she is, we've got 3 to 4 slots open for your time with Liz. Really, we Incorporated will handle like the logistics. So all you have to do is email us if you're interested, and we'll like help connect those dots with Liz. Like really stay like connected with us, and thank you so much for joining, Liz. I know that like it was amazing for me to hear. I edit my resume more than I like want to, but because it's so hard, and sometimes I'm like, I could do this better, did this, like, you know, is this green, I use green, but like, is this green actually what I should be using, and things like that. So there's always so much to do.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having me as always. And for the people who do sign up in the slots, I'm like, I like love helping people with this stuff. So I'm excited to get to do that. So thanks.
Thank you.
You want me to jump into these tips? I got a couple more before I got to split.
Oh, yes, that'd be great.
Yeah, cool. So these are kind of like my general overall tips when you're thinking about it. Like the number one thing is knowing your audience, and your audience is before anything else. It's the job you're trying to get, right? So what is that next step you're trying to make? At least know it generally, like, okay, like this is the work I want to do. This is the level I want to do it at, and I'm prepared to do it at. And then everything you're doing in your resume should be tailored to that. So like for me personally, I keep like a master resume of like, this is the like, Liz just vomited all over her paper with everything I've ever done. And then I'm like, okay, I want to be a recruiter at Adidas, right? It was like, these bullets matter, these ones don't. And I make that like, okay, like, I want to be a consultant on my own and start working with companies and individuals on like talent and branding. Okay, these bullets matter. These bullets do not anymore. Even though these bullets were so hard to let go because like they really meant something, like they just don't matter anymore for like my next North Star. So that's like the most important. Second part of the audience is the reader. So who is it? First, it's a recruiter, then it's a hiring manager, right? Those are the 2 most important. So like, what is the recruiter going through? I'm like a pretty empathetic person. If you're in the design world, like treat the interview process and the job application process like a design brief. Like, who is your user? What are they going through on their day-to-day? Like, picture them sitting down at their desk and clicking into like a system from 1990, because that's what all the corporate companies have, and going through and clicking 47 times just to get to each individual resume, like 200 times, right? While you got colleagues talking to you and asking you questions and chats going off and all of that, right? Think about it all. And then make sure like, okay, if I'm in that state, like, can I get the vital info that I need from your resume? That's super important. And know that they're not just looking at your resume to see if you're great. They're looking at your resume to see if it fits this job, period. It's not personal. It feels so personal to us when we're writing about ourselves. It's not. I'm like, do these things fit these things? The answer is no. The answer is no. Like, it's not personal. Move on. And again, you want a no or you want a yes. You do not want a maybe. And then the elements to include, think about like the job. Like if I have a target on, let's say, a small company, I don't want to put like focusing on handling like massive global volume or like led global market, like XYZ, right? I want to focus on the localized stuff. How did you drive traffic right there? Like, or, how do you work when you have no budget and still high stakes, right? Like those different things really shift. So if you're trying to make a shift from like maybe a massive budget where you got to do really cool stuff for really big clients to now like you still have kind of the same clients and the same expectations, but your budget just shrunk by 30%, maybe 70% in some cases, like you need to have projects on there that show how good you can be with nothing doing something big, because that might be the experience you'll be putting yourself into. So those different things. And then what role did you play in the experience you list? Like, so often I'm like, okay, so you were on this project, but like, were you on a team? Was it like 10? Like, what did you own, so that I can fully understand that? And a lot of times, like, knowing that information actually helps me, and then helps me ask you the right questions. And again, like, if the answer is no, the answer is no. It's better to get it sooner. So like, be upfront with your info, put it in there. Like, sometimes I feel like we're taught to like try and snake through and like sneak past everyone and like trick them into hiring you. And it's like, you're still going to have to do the job when you get there, right? Like, I would much rather be like, wow, they told Liz Connolly and her experience, hell no, like, than me being like, which part of me or the experience I wrote did they say no to? Because like, I'm actually not some of that. Like, then I don't have room to actually grow. So that's a hard part. And then point 4, I feel like I talked about a lot, like, can you provide more clear examples or brief descriptions of the role? And then again, is it with key stakeholders or who? Most relevant information first. I feel like we talked about that. Contact info and portfolio of work, like, especially if you're in a design role or a technical role. And I honestly believe that, like, if you're in comms and campaigns and marketing where you have projects to show and can like put it in a visual like portfolio and have like, this is the role I played on this project, like, that's super helpful. I'm in recruiting, and I do have a website. I think it's hidden right now because I'm fixing it, but like, I have the projects and the things that I've worked on to explain it, because I'm like, if y'all think I'm a regular recruiter, boring. No, like, I'm me. Like, this is how I do it. I want you to know that. And I feel like visual is just the way of our generation. And then what makes you different from others, you know? Don't fall into the like matching the JD, like, boring stuff. Like, show us, like, when I'm tasked with this is how I do it, and this is the result I produce. That's what makes me different. And then the last one, the less questions, the quicker you move in process. So yes, that might mean you get a no quicker. But it might mean you get a yes quicker. What you don't want is that stuff in between where it's like, I still have questions, so I'll ask them later. Because like, that human is not going to go back to that maybe pile if they got enough in the yes pile. Like, you got to get yourself to the yes pile, or you got to get yourself to the no pile, so that you can like clear yourself of that process and move on to the next. Sweet.
Cool. Thank you. It's really like, I like what you said about not making it personal, because it feels very personal to write a resume or like get on LinkedIn, because I'm talking about myself, you know, like, it doesn't get much more personal than that.
And you're taking the time to do it too.
Yeah.
So you've really.
I got rejected from a job a year and a half after I applied to it at the time, and I was like, this is not personal. Like, I was like, I still was mad like a little, but I was like, this is just like, people are just being people, like, in flawed systems, you know? So it's like, if I can get my no, if I can get my yes and move on, like, great, I can go about my day. And like, there's gonna be more opportunities. So
Yeah.
Cool. Thank you guys for having me. I do have to jump, but I appreciate you, and I'll see you soon.
All right.
Bye.
I hope everyone like took some screenshots. I'm glad I have that deck because it's super helpful. But Emily, I don't know how much of that you were like, oh yeah, I felt that before, especially in the parts of her conversation when it's like really getting into the nitty gritty. Because I can say like, oh, I managed this thing and it was really great. And to me, I know what that means, but to like get the numbers and like measure it, it's difficult.
Yeah, I think an important takeaway is not just saying it, but somehow proving it in a concise way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And to like pivot a little bit into just like, all right, we've got the job or we got the offer, right? How do we begin negotiating for, you know, for more sounds kind of weird, but like what we deserve. And if I, you know, applied and was hoping to get to that manager level or that senior level, but they put me at a level below, like how do I really navigate that, especially coming from a creative space where it's like, I can do everything that the job description tells me to do, but I know that I also like deserve more.
Right. Like communicating your worth, I think.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And I think Emily, correct me if I'm wrong, like this is a new position for you. So like congrats. How did you kind of go about like navigating from point A to point B?
So like you said, it's all about recognizing your worth. I was in a position where I felt like I wasn't being challenged. I wasn't being quite utilized to my maximum potential. So I had to figure out what is next for me. What does that look like? And for me, fortunately, it was more so creating a role for myself um, and then paving the way for myself. I know that's not always going to be the case for everyone, but having that luxury, it's super rewarding.
How did you actually like create that role? Because one of the things that is, has come up with Incorporated a lot is around defining success, not only for ourselves as individuals, but, for the agency. How did you like make your plan for like you, Emily, what you wanted to do, what you wanted to become, what you wanted to grow into, and then further craft a role around that? Like there's a lot of steps and a lot of critical thought that goes into each of those. So like, can you just tell us about your process?
Yeah, so I recognize that there was, like a hole in the position, not even in the position, but in the company. No one was doing X, Y, and Z. So at first I offered to help on the side. And then it turned into, well, you're doing a good job at that. Do you want more responsibilities? And then from there, it was, okay, well, you did this and this perfectly. So why don't we bring you on and you can officially join the team? So it's just researching ways that you can help the company, help the team, what you can provide. And maybe it's just starting off as just helping on the side and then figuring out your place there. And then you can grow yourself into a role.
How do I phrase my question? I think there's a lot of work and a lot of opportunities that are more on like, the intern or like the side of desk project or the apprentice, and like really converting that into something long-standing is a major hurdle. And so like tactically, what were those conversations like between you and your company about like, were there expectations that you set up front to say like, I noticed that this is, a space that's underutilized or like could use some help and I'd love to offer, my hands and my time? And then how did that convert to like getting into that being permanent? Was it like, I'm going to do this for 6 weeks, afterwards we're going to reassess, and then that's going to convert? Or like, how did that go?
Yeah, so you're right. It actually started off as, let's just do this as a trial run, see how it goes. Nothing is necessarily set in stone. We'll see how it works out for not just me, but for the company. See what works, and then figure out next steps from there.
And how long did it like take you? How long were you going from start to finish of like, okay, now I'm going to officially step into this new role?
I think it was about 2 to 3 months before I made the decision to join the team full time.
With that, this is probably the most taboo thing to talk about, but important. Like, how did you negotiate in that process period? And I'll just say that like negotiation doesn't just mean salary. Like there's a ton of things to negotiate outside of your pay, like the scope of your work. So say you, within those 2 or 3 months, you were working on something, but to step into that role officially, your scope was either going to get bigger or smaller. Like getting in advance, getting different types of like, benefits matter. If you want to go back to school, is that something that they like would sponsor or help you with? So like, I don't know. I think negotiation is like really big and very important. And, honestly, as women, it's hard for us to do statistically than our male counterparts. So I just think, I don't know. I don't have the answers. I always go into negotiation conversations like, I'm very glad that they were like all on the phone, so I could just like be really awkward and like make all the faces and no one would have to see me. But I do know that they're like really vital.
Yeah, I mean, just like you said, Brittany, talking about money is super taboo. But I think the thing that we tend to forget is you don't have to necessarily just ask for money. It can be things like a flexible work schedule. So right now it's super relevant because we're in a pandemic. So not everyone has the luxury of working from home 5 days a week. So you can negotiate on that. You can also negotiate on more vacation time. You mentioned tuition. So any of that kind of continuing education reimbursement, I think is important because you're only bettering yourself. But then at the same time, the company is investing in you at the end of the day. And then at that point, it's investing in itself. Other things to consider would be technology. I think that's something that we always tend to forget. So that could mean a brand new laptop, brand new equipment like a camera, a drawing tablet, whatever applies to your industry. And then along with that, maybe it's making sure that you have access to software programs, especially of the latest versions, because I know that can get pricey. So all of those things, although it's not a dollar amount, there are things that you have to consider and figure out.
Yeah, absolutely. And like, what should you be prepared for, or have you experienced, right, when you ask for something or go to the negotiation table and you get a no?
Yeah, so a no is not the worst case, I think. I think you have to be proactive and turn that no into a positive. Take that rejection, put it in your rearview mirror, and then show that you're thinking ahead and you're working ahead and you want to plan for something greater. I think you need to speak with your manager, maybe set up a sort of timeline and revisit that discussion. And then along with that timeline, whether it's 6 months from now, a year from now, make sure you have a list of deliverables that you can expect to showcase that you are worth that pay raise.
Yeah. You're right that it is really, a no's not the worst thing. And I think that's really important. That's something that I think I should note for myself because my mentality, at least, and I would love to hear like what yours is. Like, I always try to like negotiate and be willing to like walk away if the answer is no. So it is like a different framing to think about it as like, okay, no is not ultimately no. It's more of like a challenge of sorts to get to a yes.
Yeah. No, yeah, I completely agree. I feel like in a negotiation process, it also depends on what no is being said to. Some things I think are more reasonable than others for sure. But it's another opportunity for you to communicate the value of the things that you're asking for and how they help you be better at what you're doing, for sure. So yeah, I think it's a challenge for you to be better at communicating what are things that you want and how they help you better yourself, for sure.
And I'd definitely love to hear from you both who sit more like on the creative space and both come from like this graphic design background of like determining and defining your worth. How do you go about doing that, especially when it's not like there's a universal database of like you have X years of experience and you've studied this is what you deserve.
Yeah, so for me, my mindset is that self-worth is really how you value yourself, and no one can or will tell you how much or what you're worth. And when I say how much, it's not only in a dollar amount, it's what's in here and what's in here. So you have to define that for yourself. I think it's really important that we look within ourselves and trust that we are enough. And I think if there's anything that people tuning in can take away from at least my portion of this discussion is knowing that you are enough. And you have to believe that in order for others to even believe it.
Definitely. I would say sort of the same thing. And to add to it, I would say owning your story as well, trying to find things about yourself that are really unique and how you can communicate that to the best that shows why having you around to do a certain job or just be in the company in general or whatever you're doing is valuable, I think is a really important way for people to recognize that as well, because it's not only about what you're capable of, but also about the things that have shaped your worldview. That's really important.
Yeah. And it sounds like really kitschy, but like understanding yourself as an individual and not just yourself in the context of just labor is really important. And I would say that's probably a challenge for all of us because, we do live in a capitalist society. And so here we are.
Yeah.
And this is just like, our, fortunate for some and unfortunate for some other people, that this is just like our reality.
Yeah.
Just to take a quick pivot and like just learn about your individual experiences a little bit more. What are some of like the technical things that you have learned that have helped you with your craft?
I can go first. So I feel like I've interned for a very long time at different fashion companies, and technical skills for me has been more so around on like the branding side of things. So definitely working with Photoshop or like I think Adobe programs in general has been really big for me as a graphic designer, and knowing how to use those tools to achieve something. There's millions of ways to achieve the same thing on all those softwares, but knowing the best way to do it so that you can work fast and produce something is really important. I think also for me, the places that I've interned at are on the smaller end. So being able to do those things, but on a small budget and to excel as well is a really important skill that I had to learn. And I think so far in my career, it has been, those are skills that I go back in a lot. And I feel like I reflect a lot on the internships that I've done and to how they've helped me be at this level of my career. But also I'm always learning, and those technical skills never really stop. I think definitely though a good base is being just familiar with programs, especially as a graphic designer.
Yeah, Bador, like you said, I think with design, it's one of those industries where it's ever evolving. You have to rely on yourself to learn.
Hey, Emily, I think you're muted. It's like, how many times have you said that on Zoom?
Okay. So like I was saying, I think with design, it's one of those industries where it's ever evolving. You always have to learn as you go. It's not something like math where you learn an equation and it just ends right there. Some of the technical skills that I have learned, especially more recently, now that I've entered the realm of footwear design, I wasn't formally trained in footwear design. I knew nothing about it. I went to school for graphic design, but a lot of those skills, technical skills, they directly apply. Not saying I would consider myself a footwear designer. I can't draw, but I still can use those skills from my graphic design schooling and from past jobs, and it'll directly relate.
Yeah. And that's definitely kind of tying back to like what Liz was saying is every experience that you've had has shaped you into the person you are. And you can
Exactly
pull on those to really not only amplify the work that you've done, but to help you get to, the next step. And as we're like getting closer to, the end of this conversation, I do want to end with asking you both, like, what your biggest career win would be in your opinion. You take a beat just to think about that.
I can go first.
Yeah.
Okay, so I am within the sneaker industry, the footwear industry, and sneakers and streetwear has been part of my interest ever since I was a kid. But for some reason, as much as I love sneakers all this time, I never really thought about being behind the scenes. It was always, okay, if I love sneakers, I'm going to work at Foot Locker or Finish Line. I'm going to work just in a shoe store. I never really quite thought that I could be behind the scenes and help make people's dreams of footwear be executed. So it's been really rewarding working with like athletes and celebrities to help their dreams come true. being able to marry my passion of design with sneakers. I think that's the best thing ever.
I love that. I think for me, I've always been very involved in creative stuff, but also very analytically driven. So doing the type of work that I'm doing now as the creative director of Incorporated, where we're working with clients like Champ Sports and Garrickson to create special experiences around sneakers has been really interesting, not only from a creative standpoint, but also thinking about how does this piece of creative relate to a goal that we have, or how is it how do I say this? How does it align with the brand's values, but also the partners that we're working with from a creative standpoint, obviously, but also from a goal standpoint. So that's been a really big win for me, is merging both of my interests and doing it in a way that benefits others and the community for sure.
Yeah, it's been a big win for the agency to have you, so. And I mean, honestly, thank you both, and Liz, who was here earlier, for just like coming here and having like a very honest conversation about something that is so important and honestly kind of difficult. It's like telling your story is hard. It's very personal. Knowing what you don't know and knowing what you need to know, and getting, I think I'm kind of paraphrasing what Liz was mentioning, but your resume is really just telling the what, and like the interview and the experience and everything else tells like who you are. And so even like the separation of those two things is really helpful. It was really helpful for me. And Emily, like, can't wait to continue to work with you and Garrickson even further. I think what you do is amazing. Like, such a unique space to be working in, and to be able to work on such amazing products for like any type of people. It's a lot of craft and a lot of talent that you all have. So it was great to like have you here. And thank you to everyone who joined. This is how you can stay connected with us. And once again, if you do want to connect with Liz for like a one-on-one session, get tactical on your resume, talk to her about like how you can more effectively tell your story, and really pick out the skills that you need to be showcasing for where you want to go, and like your personal definition of success, like please let us know. Email us at info@incorporated.com. And thank you to like everyone here, Richard back on productions helping us. It's amazing. Design Week's been great, and I hope everyone's been enjoying the rest of the content that has been going on. And please do check out the website for any of like the recaps. And yeah, have a wonderful evening.